Good morning. I'm Nova Blake, and this is your complete political briefing for Thursday, April 23rd, 2026. Today, Iran seizes 2 commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz just hours after President Trump extended the ceasefire indefinitely, while Virginia voters hand Democrats a stunning redistricting victory that could reshape the House. Let's get into it. Starting with the top stories from across the American political landscape. Iran's Revolutionary Guard seized 2 commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz on Wednesday and fired on a third, just hours after President Trump announced he was extending the ceasefire indefinitely at Pakistan's request. The British military's Maritime Trade Operations Center confirmed the attacks, reporting that a Revolutionary Guard gunboat approached a container ship without warning and opened fire, causing heavy damage to the vessel's bridge, with all crew reported safe. Iran's naval command then announced it had directed both seized ships to Iranian territorial waters, calling it a response to what Tehran describes as maritime violations. While Iran's foreign minister simultaneously called the American naval blockade an act of war and a ceasefire violation, President Trump announced Tuesday evening, just hours before the original 2-week ceasefire was set to expire, that he was extending it indefinitely at Pakistan's request, giving Iran time to present what he called a unified proposal to end the war. Vice President J.D. Vance canceled his planned trip to Islamabad for a second round of direct talks after Iran said it would not be attending. Trump simultaneously maintained the American naval blockade of Iranian ports, writing on social media that Iran is losing $500 million a day and that its military and police are not getting paid. Iran's president said Wednesday that Tehran welcomes dialogue, but that the blockade and threats are the main obstacles to progress. Virginia voters approved a constitutional referendum on Tuesday that allows the Democratic-controlled state legislature to redraw Virginia's congressional map, potentially delivering as many as 4 additional seats to Democrats in the November midterm elections. The Associated Press called the race after a narrow majority of voters backed the measure, shifting Virginia's congressional delegation from a 6-5 Republican advantage to a map where Democrats could hold 10 of the state's 11 congressional districts. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries declared that Trump's effort to rig the midterm elections through redistricting had been thwarted, though multiple Republican lawsuits remain pending and courts could yet block the new map. The Justice Department indicted the Southern Poverty Law Center, the prominent civil rights organization based in Montgomery, Alabama, on Tuesday, on an 11-count federal fraud case. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche alleged that the SPLC secretly funneled more than $3 million in donor funds to paid informants embedded inside white supremacist groups, including the Ku Klux Klan, the National Socialist Movement, and the National Alliance, between 2014 and 2023. The SPLC rejected the charges as politically motivated, with interim CEO Brian Fair saying the informant program saved lives and was used to gather intelligence on the nation's most violent extremist groups. The indictment was filed in federal district court in Montgomery, Alabama. The Senate voted 52-46 on Tuesday to begin a budget reconciliation process aimed at ending the 67-day Department of Homeland Security partial government shutdown, the longest in the department's history. The $70 billion resolution, released by the Senate Budget Committee, would fund immigration and customs enforcement and border patrol for 3 years through the rest of Trump's term, bypassing the filibuster and requiring only a simple majority. Senate Democrats have blocked the funding since mid-February, following the fatal shootings of 2 protesters by federal agents. Republicans are pressing to pass the measure by the end of April, but face potential pushback from members of their own conference who want to add additional priorities, including farm aid and the Save America Act voter ID legislation. 2 CIA officers were among American officials killed in a vehicle crash in Mexico that has prompted a probe into covert United States counter-narcotics operations in the country. The crash killed multiple personnel and is being investigated to determine the circumstances of their presence in Mexico and the scope of the covert operation. The incident comes as the Trump administration has been conducting escalating military and intelligence operations against drug trafficking organizations in Mexico and across Latin America, including drone strikes and naval operations in the Caribbean. Mexico's government has not publicly commented on the reported CIA involvement. The DHS shutdown reached its 67th day on Wednesday, setting a new record for the longest partial government shutdown in the department's history. With the DHS still unfunded, TSA officers and other agency personnel continue to work without a guaranteed paycheck, and the department has warned of a growing payroll crisis. Senate Republicans are betting that budget reconciliation will unlock the $70 billion ICE and Border Patrol funding package before the end of April, but procedural rules allow for an open-ended amendment process that could significantly slow the legislation. The redistricting battle triggered by President Trump is now considered largely a wash nationally, according to analysts tracking the midterm map. California Democrats earlier offset potential Republican gains from the Texas redistricting pushed by Trump. Virginia's result neutralized new GOP-leaning seats drawn in North Carolina and Missouri. However, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is calling for a special legislative session this month to carve out additional Republican-leaning districts, a move that could tip the national advantage back toward Republicans. The mid-decade redistricting war, launched by Trump last year, has already produced the most expensive redistricting campaigns in Virginia history. The International Energy Agency declared Tuesday that the United States-Israeli war on Iran has created the worst energy crisis the world has ever faced. The IEA head said Europe had approximately 6 weeks of jet fuel supplies remaining. Military planners from more than 30 countries gathered at a Royal Air Force base in the United Kingdom this week to develop a multinational framework to safeguard the Strait of Hormuz once a lasting ceasefire is achieved. Oil prices rose above $96 per barrel Wednesday amid the renewed ship attacks and escalating uncertainty over peace talks. The Israeli-Lebanese ceasefire, brokered by Trump on April 16th, showed new signs of fracture Tuesday when Hezbollah fired rockets and drones at Israeli forces for the first time since the truce took effect, responding to what the group described as Israeli attacks on civilians and the destruction of villages in southern Lebanon. Israel's defense minister confirmed the military is maintaining both military and diplomatic pressure in Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah, and Israeli troops remain present in southern Lebanon despite the ceasefire. The ceasefire was set to last 10 days and is due to expire in the coming days, adding another layer of diplomatic urgency to an already volatile regional picture. Now turning to Washington and the latest actions from the current administration. Here are 10 significant developments from the administration this week. President Trump extended the United States-Iran ceasefire indefinitely on Tuesday, just hours before the original 2-week truce was set to expire, citing Pakistan's request for more time. Trump stated on Truth Social that he is directing the American military to continue the naval blockade of Iranian ports while Iran prepares a unified diplomatic proposal. Vice President Vance canceled his planned Islamabad trip after Iran declined to send negotiators for a second round of talks. The extension came with no set expiration date, and Iran had not formally acknowledged or accepted it as of Wednesday morning. The Department of Justice filed an 11-count fraud indictment against the Southern Poverty Law Center on Tuesday, alleging the organization secretly channeled more than $3 million in donor funds to paid informants inside white supremacist and extremist groups between 2014 and 2023. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche personally announced the charges at a press conference alongside FBI Director Kash Patel. The indictment charges the SPLC with 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of bank fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. The SPLC said the charges are false and politically motivated. The Senate launched a budget reconciliation process this week to end the 67-day DHS government shutdown, voting 52 to 46 to begin debate on a $70 billion resolution to fund ICE and Border Patrol for 3 years. Senate Majority Leader John Thune aims to pass the measure by month's end using a parliamentary maneuver that bypasses the 60-vote filibuster threshold. The process allows amendments from both sides, creating potential complications from Republican senators who want to attach other priorities. The resolution must also pass the House, where Republicans hold their thinnest majority in decades. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reinforced the administration's economic blockade posture Wednesday, posting publicly that the American Navy would continue enforcing the blockade of Iranian ports and that Iran's primary oil storage hub on Karg Island would run out of storage capacity within days, a development he said would force Iranian oil wells to shut in and deepen Tehran's economic collapse. Bessent estimated Iran is losing approximately $500 million per day and said the administration's economic and military pressure strategy remains fully intact even with the ceasefire extension. The U.S. military confirmed Wednesday that its naval blockade enforcement continues, with United States Central Command issuing updated warnings to commercial vessels approaching the Strait of Hormuz. American forces intercepted additional ships attempting to reach Iranian ports this week. CENTCOM has stated that the blockade will be enforced impartially, regardless of the vessel's nationality, and that any ship attempting to run the blockade will be subject to the right of visit, search, and compelled compliance by force. The seized cargo ship Tosca remains in American military custody. The administration's planned second round of Iran peace talks, which had been set for this week in Islamabad with Vice President Vance leading the American delegation, was suspended after Iran declined to send negotiators. Senior White House officials said the ceasefire extension gives Tehran an opportunity to formulate a unified negotiating position. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif publicly thanked Trump for the extension and pledged to continue mediating between the two sides. Pakistan had already implemented extensive security measures in Islamabad in anticipation of the negotiations. The FDA confirmed this week that it is moving forward with the first-ever framework for human clinical trials of ibogaine in the United States, following President Trump's executive order signed Saturday. The agency will also issue national priority review vouchers for 3 psychedelic compounds this week, which can reduce drug approval timelines from months to weeks. No psychedelic has yet received FDA approval for any medical use. The administration has directed $50 million in federal matching funds to states pursuing research into psychedelic therapies with a particular focus on treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder in veterans. The nomination of Erica Schwartz to lead the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is advancing following her formal designation as Trump's nominee last week. Schwartz, a former Deputy Surgeon General and retired Coast Guard Rear Admiral, will need to undergo Senate confirmation hearings. The CDC has been without a permanent director for nearly a year, and Schwartz would take over as the agency manages the worst measles outbreak in a generation, alongside severe budget cuts ordered by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. Acting Labor Secretary Keith Sonderling was confirmed in his role Wednesday, following the resignation of Lori Chavez DeRemer on Monday. Sonderling had already been managing the department's day-to-day operations in the weeks leading up to Chavez DeRemer's departure. The White House has not yet announced a permanent replacement. Chavez DeRemer's departure marks the third cabinet resignation of Trump's second term, following Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Attorney General Pam Bondi, all 3 of whom were women. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced this week that he is calling a special legislative session to redraw Florida's congressional districts, a move that would add additional Republican-leaning seats to the national House map. DeSantis's decision comes directly in response to Virginia's Tuesday vote to approve a Democratic-drawn map and to California's earlier redistricting moves that offset Republican gains in Texas. Republicans and Democrats are each racing to maximize their seat advantages before November, and analysts say Florida's potential redistricting could tip the national balance back toward Republicans, resetting a war that both parties have now spent well over $100 million fighting. That's your full briefing for Thursday, April 23, 2026. I'm Nova Blake. Stay informed, stay ahead. We'll see you next time.